Rose Sinclair grew up with every luxury the world had to offer. Grand estates, private jets, priceless works of art adorning every wall. These were not privileges to her. They were simply normal. And yet, as she wandered through the gleaming halls of her family's vast estate, she felt nothing but emptiness. For 26 years, she had been given everything. Everything except the one thing she truly longed for, a life that was real. She had always been the perfect daughter of the Sinclair family, one of the wealthiest dynasties on the East Coast. Her parents had built their empire from nothing, and though they had done so with integrity, their image, the Sinclair legacy, was everything to them. They expected Rose to inherit that legacy, to uphold the family's name, and of course, to marry someone worthy of the world they lived in. But Rose felt like a bird trapped in a gilded cage. Every decision was watched. Every step was measured. Her future had already been decided, down to the finest detail. Rose Sinclair stood motionless before the grand mirror in the dressing room of the Sinclair estate, staring at her own reflection. The ivory evening gown hugged her slender frame, every lace detail and gemstone shimmering beneath the opulent chandelier. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, accentuating her delicate features and deep brown eyes. She looked perfect, or at least that was what her parents wanted. From the grand hall, the clinking of crystal glasses echoed, mingling with polite laughter from the upper echelons of society. Another lavish party, one of countless gatherings she was obligated to attend. Rose knew her place well. She was nothing more than a carefully placed ornament in the flawless portrait the Sinclair family had painted. A prized rose, displayed for admiration and value. The door swung open. Lucas Sinclair, her brother, stepped inside. His tuxedo was impeccable, his sharp gaze sweeping over Rose as if assessing her. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with quiet concern. Rose turned to face him, offering a faint smile that did little to mask the exhaustion in her eyes. "Do you think I have a choice?" Lucas sighed and stepped closer. "Father has arranged for you to meet someone tonight. Henry Beaumont. His family owns a major banking empire." A small crease formed between Rose's brows. She was all too familiar with these arrangements. Again and again, her father paraded before her the men he deemed worthy of her. They were always wealthy, always distinguished, but never the ones to stir her heart. "Do you know what I truly want, Lucas?" she whispered, her gaze distant. Lucas studied her for a long moment before resting a hand on her shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I do. But you are a Sinclair. You can't live like an ordinary person." A bittersweet smile curved Rose's lips. A Sinclair. That name was a gilded cage, ensnaring her, keeping her from reaching for what her heart truly desired. Below, the party had reached its height. Gentlemen in tailored suits, ladies in glittering gowns, all toasting to their fortunes and legacies. Rose descended the staircase slowly, feeling every pair of eyes settle upon her. Henry Beaumont stood near the center of the room, a glass of red wine in hand, a carefully measured smile on his lips. She knew what was expected of her. She had to smile, to engage in polite conversation, to play the role of the perfect heiress. But as the weight of expectations constricted her chest, she felt the urge to run. A soft breeze drifted in from the garden, rustling the sheer curtains. Rose turned toward it, and a reckless thought flashed through her mind. Without another moment's hesitation, she pivoted sharply, her heels gliding across the marble floor. The music, the laughter, the glittering spectacle, all of it faded behind her as she strode through the garden, past the grand estate gates, toward the car waiting beyond. Sliding into the driver's seat, her fingers trembled slightly against the wheel. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to leave, to breathe air untainted by duty and pretense. With one decisive press of the gas pedal, she sped into the night, leaving behind the dazzling lights of the world she no longer wished to belong to. Fate awaited her ahead, though she had no way of knowing where it would lead. The long, dark asphalt road stretched ahead, winding like a ribbon through the sparse forest. Streetlights, scattered along the way, cast lonely pools of light onto the pitch-black pavement. Rose pressed down on the accelerator, letting the wind whip through her hair, feeling as if she were severing every invisible chain that had bound her for so many years. She had no destination, only the need to escape the gilded but suffocating world she had always known, if only for one night. Suddenly, the engine gave a strange sputter. The steering wheel trembled, at first slightly, then more violently. Rose frowned, easing her foot off the gas, but before she could react, the car jolted to a stop. A faint grinding noise followed, then silence. She exhaled heavily, resting her hands on the wheel before glancing out the window. The road stretched into the distance, flanked only by trees and darkness. No passing cars, no one in sight. She reached for her phone. No signal. Perfect, she muttered, leaning back against the seat, willing herself to stay calm. She wasn't the type to panic, but this was the first time she found herself in a situation like this. Alone, without a driver, without bodyguards. Pushing open the door, she stepped out. The stillness of the night surrounded her, making her acutely aware of how small she was in the vastness of the world. Tonight, she was no longer Rose Sinclair, the esteemed heiress of a powerful dynasty. She was simply a girl, stranded on an empty road with nowhere to go. Then, a low rumble broke the silence. Rose turned. In the distance, headlights appeared, growing closer. A pickup truck, old and worn, slowed as it approached. The beams illuminated her, and instinctively, she took a small step back. The truck rolled to a stop. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, his frame strong beneath the rolled-up sleeves of a button-down shirt, paired with faded jeans. The truck's headlights cast sharp shadows over his features, chiseled jaw, piercing eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He didn't have the polished charm of the men Rose had grown up around, the ones bred for high society. No, there was something raw about him, unrefined, real. He stepped forward, his voice low but steady, carrying a quiet confidence. Car trouble? Rose hesitated for a second before nodding. Seems like it. I don't know much about cars. He raised an eyebrow, studying her briefly before crouching down to inspect the vehicle. Within moments, he straightened, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his pocket. Starter issue. Might be an electrical problem. I can try to get it running again. Rose blinked, slightly caught off guard. No questions about who she was, no prying glances, no hint of opportunism in his expression. That, more than anything, put her at ease. Well then, I'd appreciate it, she said, offering a small smile. He said nothing, just gave a short nod before retrieving a toolkit from his truck and getting to work. Rose stood beside him, watching. She had never seen someone repair a car with their own hands before. In her world, a single phone call was all it took to have a broken-down vehicle replaced. After a while, he wiped a streak of oil from his forehead and straightened. Try it now. Rose slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine shuddered, then roared back to life. A relieved smile spread across her lips as she looked back at him. You're a miracle worker. He let out a quiet chuckle. Just basic mechanics. She stepped out of the car, smoothing down the fabric of her dress before giving him a curious look. Are you a mechanic? He shook his head. No, I'm building a startup in the tech industry. But I worked in a garage back in college to pay my way through school. Something about that intrigued her. A man who had built his own path, who hadn't relied on a name or a fortune to define him. So different from the men she had known. Those born into privilege, who never had to struggle, yet still believed they were superior. I'm Rose, she said, extending her hand. He took it, his grip warm, roughened by work. Adrian Brooks? The name meant nothing to her. Yet in some inexplicable way, it felt familiar. Rose had no idea that this chance encounter would change the course of her life forever. Adrian's grip was firm, yet not rough. Even after he let go, Rose could still feel the lingering warmth on her skin. His eyes, illuminated by the glow of the headlights, held sincerity without curiosity, as if she were just another passerby, not someone with a name that carried weight. Where are you headed at this hour? Adrian asked, his voice laced with nothing but casual interest. Rose realized she had no real answer. She had only wanted to escape, but she had no idea where to go. She couldn't very well tell him that she had just fled a tedious high society gathering where her father had tried to pair her with a man he deemed suitable for marriage. "I was just going for a drive," she said, keeping her tone light. "Sometimes I just need some space." Adrian nodded, seeming to accept her answer without suspicion. "I get that. I take late-night drives too when my mind gets too cluttered." She studied him, intrigued. "You're in tech, right? What exactly do you do?" A flicker of passion ignited in his eyes. "I'm building a startup, a software company. We're developing a data management platform for small businesses, helping them streamline operations." Rose was caught off guard by the way he spoke about his work. Not boastful, not performative, just genuine passion. The men in her world talked about what they owned. Adrian talked about what he was trying to build. "So, how long has your company been running?" Adrian exhaled a soft chuckle, leaning against the car. "Almost 2 years. Still tough. We're a small team, working around the clock to secure funding and land clients." He shrugged. "I left a stable job to chase this dream, so failure isn't really an option." Something in Rose tightened. She had never known that feeling, the weight of standing on your own, with no safety net, no legacy paving the way. Her life, though luxurious, had never truly belonged to her. She wanted to say something, but she knew that if she revealed too much, everything would change. Men always looked at her differently once they knew who she was. Admiration, hesitation, or worse, opportunism. "I work in business too," she said carefully, keeping her words vague. "Just a secretary. Nothing special." Adrian's expression didn't shift. No flicker of recognition, no shift in demeanor. Just a simple nod. "Well, that makes 2 of us," he joked, a small smirk playing at his lips. "I always say, secretaries hold the real power in a company. Without them, everything would fall apart." Rose laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh. It had been too long since she had felt this light. "I'll be sure to remind my boss of that." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the rustling of trees and the distant hum of an occasional passing car. "Thank you for helping me," Rose said softly, sincerity laced in every word. "It's nothing." But Adrian glanced at the empty road. "You probably shouldn't be driving alone this late. Want me to follow behind you, just to make sure you get home safe?" Rose blinked, surprised by the simple kindness of the offer. No pressure, no ulterior motive, just a decent man looking out for a stranger. She shook her head, offering him a small smile. "That's not necessary. I'll be fine." Adrian nodded but didn't move, watching as she opened her car door and slipped inside. "Well then, see you around, Rose." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, something unexplainable stirring in her chest at the way he said her name. "See you around, Adrian." With that, she pressed the gas, her car rolling forward, headlights cutting through the night. In the rearview mirror, she saw him standing there, the glow of her taillights casting a fleeting silhouette before she turned onto another road. Her heart beat steadily, yet something about this encounter lingered. She didn't know if she would ever see him again, but for the first time in a long time, she wanted to. Rose drove slowly down the empty road, but her mind lingered on the place she had just left. The image of Adrian Brooks standing under the glow of her headlights, his quiet smile, his sincere eyes, remained vivid, refusing to fade. Strange. She had met countless men in high society, successful businessmen, heirs to powerful dynasties, but none had left an impression quite like Adrian. Perhaps it was because he was different. No pretense, no arrogance. Just a man who had built his own path, chasing his dreams with his own 2 hands. A small smile touched her lips, warmth unfurling in her chest. By the time she returned to the Sinclair estate, everything was just as she had left it. Golden lights spilled through the grand windows. Music drifted from the ballroom. The party was still in full swing. Her world was still here, polished, perfect, but painfully hollow. A world where even love followed a set of rules. Slipping through the back entrance, Rose moved quietly, hoping to go unnoticed. But as she reached the staircase, a voice stopped her. "Where have you been?" "Lucas." She froze, inhaling deeply before turning around. Her brother stood at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed, his sharp gaze scanning her as if searching for answers she wasn't ready to give. "I just went out for a bit." Lucas was silent for a moment, his eyes drifting to the hem of her gown, now slightly dusted with dirt, to the faint smudge of mud on her heels. He exhaled, shaking his head. "You can't keep running like this, Rose." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not running. I just wanted a little freedom." Lucas studied her for a long time before finally giving a small nod. "All right, but Father won't be pleased if he finds out. Don't disappoint him." Rose didn't reply. Instead, she turned and ascended the stairs. Inside her room, she shut the door behind her and leaned against it, letting out a slow breath. In the mirror, she saw herself, still Rose Sinclair, still the daughter of a powerful family. And yet something was different. Her gaze dropped her phone. Her fingers hovered over her contacts, hesitating for only a second before stopping on a newly saved name. Adrian Brooks. She didn't know why she had saved his number. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe a part of her didn't want to lose touch with the man who had helped her on this strange, restless night. After a pause, she typed a simple message. "Thank you for helping me. Good night." She wasn't sure if he would reply, but just seconds later, her phone vibrated softly. "No problem. Good night, Rose." She stared at the message, then smiled. For the first time in years, she felt like there was someone worth looking forward to. In the days following their fateful encounter, Rose and Adrian kept in touch. At first, it was just simple messages, morning greetings, small anecdotes from their daily lives. But gradually, the conversations grew longer, deeper. Rose didn't know when it started, but each morning, she found herself waiting for a message from Adrian. He didn't use flowery words like the men in her world, yet everything he said felt real. For the first time, she felt heard, understood. She continued living the life of Rose Sinclair, the elegant heiress attending glamorous parties, meeting suitable men handpicked by her father. But inside, she felt more and more detached from it all. Whenever she stood in a ballroom filled with refined gentlemen in tailored suits, her mind drifted to someone else, a man in a simple button-down shirt, hands stained with engine grease, whose eyes burned with passion when he spoke of his dreams. Then, their first meeting happened so naturally, as if it had always been meant to be. Rose chose a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street. Not a grand restaurant with menus in French, but a simple place with wooden tables and the soft aroma of coffee lingering in the air. Adrian was already there, sitting in the corner, his laptop open. As soon as he saw her, he closed it and stood, greeting her with an easy smile. "Rose." There was no tension in his voice, no affected charm, just the effortless comfort of someone who didn't need to impress her. She slipped off her light coat and took a seat across from him. "Did you get here early?" Adrian shrugged. "I have a habit of arriving ahead of time." "What about you?" "Not busy today." Rose smiled. She had told her family she had a business meeting, a small excuse to steal a few hours away from their world. "Today, I gave myself the day off." The server arrived. Rose ordered an Earl Grey tea, while Adrian asked for black coffee. "You don't drink coffee?" he asked. She shook her head. "I prefer tea. Coffee keeps me up all night." Adrian chuckled. "I can't function without it. Back in college, I once stayed up 3 days straight on coffee and instant noodles just to finish a project." Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Really? But why tech? Why did you choose this path?" He leaned back in his chair, thinking for a moment. "I guess I've always been fascinated by how things work. As a kid, I used to take everything apart, phones, radios, even my dad's old computer, just to see what was inside. And as I got older, I realized technology wasn't just about machines. It could change the world." Rose watched him, unable to hide her admiration. "And what about you?" Adrian tilted his head slightly. "What's your work like?" She hesitated. She had rehearsed a version of the truth, something simple and vague enough to maintain the illusion. But sitting across from him, she felt a flicker of doubt. She didn't want to lie, but she also couldn't let him know the truth. "Not yet. I'm just a secretary," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian didn't seem suspicious. "So, You deal with numbers and paperwork all day? Rose laughed. Exactly. But sometimes I wish I could do something bigger. He nodded thoughtfully. I think you can. You don't seem like someone who settles. His words caught her off guard. Had he already seen something in her that she hadn't dared to admit to herself? After that, their meetings became more frequent, unfolding as naturally as breathing. Not lavish dinners with expensive wine, but simple moments, strolling through the park, sharing quiet cups of coffee, sitting on a bench talking about dreams and life. Rose found herself falling in love with Adrian. Not the kind of love she had grown up witnessing, measured by wealth and social standing, but something different, something pure. When she was with him, she could laugh without restraint, speak without weighing every word. But like a perfect painting beginning to crack, the differences in their worlds started to show. One evening, as they sat by the lake watching the sunset, Adrian suddenly asked, Rose, why do we always meet in quiet places like this? Do you not want your friends or colleagues to know about me? Her hands clenched together, gaze dropping to the shimmering water. She had known this question would come. She just wasn't ready for it. It's not what you think, Adrian, she murmured. It's just there are things you don't know about me. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then simply nodded. I'll wait. His quiet patience made something inside her ache. She knew that, sooner or later, she would have to tell him the truth. But what scared her wasn't the revelation itself. It was the fear that once he knew, he would no longer look at her the same way. Not as Rose, just as Rose Sinclair. A cold wind swept across the lake, but she didn't feel it. Because in that moment, she knew, no matter what happened, she couldn't let this man go. Rose knew she couldn't keep hiding forever, but she still wasn't ready to reveal the truth. She and Adrian had been together for months now. Simple dates filled with laughter, fingers entwined as they walked down quiet streets, late nights spent sharing dreams. Everything about it made Rose believe this was the love she had always longed for. A love unshackled by status, untouched by family obligations. But deep down, she also knew that their worlds were parallel lines. And if they ever intersected, she feared everything would collapse. Her family had begun to notice the changes in her. Lucas was the first to confront her. One morning, as Rose sat by her window, absorbed in a book, Lucas entered her room, closing the door behind him. You're hiding something, Rose? His voice wasn't accusatory, but it carried an undeniable weight. Rose shut her book and looked up at her brother. I don't know what you're talking about. Lucas crossed his arms, his gaze sharp. You barely show up at family events anymore. You've stopped caring about high society gatherings and the meetings father arranges for you. Instead, you disappear at odd hours, returning home with a different look in your eyes. He paused before saying the words outright. You're seeing someone, aren't you? Rose pressed her lips together, staying silent. Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. Rose, if he's the right man for you, then why are you hiding him? The question caught her off guard. It's not that he's not right, she murmured. I just want to keep this love pure, untouched by wealth and status. Lucas let out a quiet laugh, one without humor. Do you really think love can exist in a glass box safe from the world? That's not how this works. She met his gaze, her voice gentle but firm. Love is placed in our hearts by God, not to be measured by material things, but to be believed in. Lucas exhaled deeply. Then tell me, do you truly believe he loves you for you? Without hesitation, Rose nodded. I do. Lucas studied her for a long moment before shaking his head. You can run from this family, but you can't run from the truth forever. One day he'll find out who you are. And when that day comes, are you certain this love won't change? Rose turned toward the window. She had no answer for that. One evening, Rose and Adrian sat on a bench overlooking the Thames. The city lights reflected on the water, shimmering like fallen stars scattered across the surface. Adrian gently squeezed her hand, his gaze distant. Rose, there's something I need to ask you. She turned to him, waiting. He took a deep breath before meeting her eyes. We've been together for a while now. I know I don't have much, no fortune, no name to offer you. But what I do have is a heart that loves you more than anything in this world. Rose felt her heart tighten. Adrian smiled, warmth laced with the slightest hint of nervousness. "Marry me, Rose." The world seemed to still in that moment. She opened her mouth, but no words came. She had always known her love for Adrian was real, but she had never imagined this moment would come. The moment she had to make a choice that would alter the course of her life forever. She knew that if she said yes, she would have to leave everything behind. Her family, her wealth, the only life she had ever known. But as she looked into Adrian's eyes, she also knew that if she said no, she would lose the most precious thing she had ever found. She closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer. "Lord, if this is the path you have chosen for me, give me the strength to walk it." When she opened them, she had her answer. She smiled, holding his hand tighter. "Yes, Adrian, I'll marry you." A breath of relief escaped his lips before he pulled her into his arms. Under the vast night sky, Rose felt like a bird breaking free from its golden cage, spreading its wings for the very first time. She didn't know what the future would hold, but if this love was a gift from God, she believed he would light the way. Rose had never imagined that married life could be this simple. Adrian's small apartment was nothing like the Sinclair estate. No expensive oil paintings, no leather-bound chairs exuding quiet luxury. But it had something that her gilded home never did: peace. Each morning, she woke up beside the man she loved, no knocks from housekeepers, no rigid schedules waiting to dictate her day. She brewed tea, made a simple breakfast in their tiny kitchen, and sent Adrian off to work with a smile. She was no longer the Sinclair heiress. She was now Rose Brooks, Adrian's wife, a simple secretary, a woman living the life she had chosen for herself. But reality was never as beautiful as a dream. Adrian's company was still small, still struggling to secure investors and clients. He worked relentlessly, often coming home long past midnight. Rose saw it all. The sleepless nights spent in front of his computer, the failed calls, the rejected contracts. She knew Adrian was fighting for their future, and she knew she couldn't just sit back and let him bear it alone. So she decided to help him, without him ever knowing. Using the connections from her past, Rose quietly paved the way for Adrian. She reached out to old acquaintances, to business partners of her family, people Adrian had never had access to. She never mentioned her name directly, never made it obvious. Just a few well-placed suggestions, a few carefully arranged meetings. Opportunities began to appear. Introductions to the right people at the right time. Offers that Adrian had never even dared to hope for. He believed it was all his own hard work, and he deserved every bit of success. But he didn't know that, with every step he took forward, Rose had already been there, clearing the path in silence. One evening, Adrian came home, his face lit with exhilaration. "Rose," he called the moment he stepped through the door. "We landed our first major contract. A big company wants to partner with us." Rose turned from the stove, smiling. "Really? I knew you'd do it." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I can't believe it. Everything's finally falling into place." Resting her head against his chest, Rose hid the small, knowing smile on her lips. God always found a way to help those who deserved it. Adrian deserved this success. She had no regrets about standing behind him, being the invisible wings that carried him higher. But deep down, Rose knew one thing. The farther Adrian climbed, the wider his world would become. Their quiet dinners would soon be replaced with business meetings, work trips, invitations to events he had never been a part of before. She didn't fear Adrian changing, but she knew, inevitably, he would step into the world she had once left behind. The world of power, ambition, and temptation. She never voiced her fears. She simply prayed, "Lord, please watch over him. Please help him remember that love and gratitude are worth more than anything else in this world." She didn't know then that her prayer would soon be tested. The first storm in their marriage had already begun to take shape. Adrian was finally reaching for the dream he had fought so hard to achieve. That first contract had secured a significant investment for his company. The once cramped office now had more employees, meetings with clients became more frequent, and influential investors were starting to take notice of the name Adrian Brooks. And then everything changed. Success came faster than he had ever imagined. In less than a year, His startup transformed from an obscure name into a rising force in the industry. Lucrative contracts, powerful connections, doors opening to places he had never dared to enter before. It all unfolded before him like a grand, golden pathway. But in exchange, the time he once had for Rose slowly disappeared. At first, she barely noticed the shift. She understood Adrian's ambition. She had fallen in love with that very part of him, the man who would sacrifice everything to chase his dream. Late nights at the office, missed dinners because of meetings, sleepless nights spent working. She accepted it all as the price they had to pay for the future they had envisioned together. But over time, something began to feel different. Short texts replaced the long conversations they used to share. Mornings that once started with a lingering embrace turned into a rushed pat on the shoulder before he dashed out the door. Their evenings together grew fewer, and even when Adrian was home, his mind seemed to be somewhere far beyond the walls of their small apartment. One night, as Rose cleared the dinner table, alone, Adrian walked in, his suit carrying the faint scent of wine. "Have you eaten?" she asked, her voice gentle but laced with quiet concern. Loosening his tie, he rubbed his temples. "I had dinner with a client." Rose nodded, stacking the dishes in the sink. "You've been so busy lately," she said, keeping her tone light. Adrian sighed, leaning against the counter. "Rose, you know how important this is. If I don't seize this opportunity, the company won't grow the way it needs to." She turned to him, her gaze searching. "I know, Adrian, but sometimes it feels like you're forgetting about me." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" Rose pressed her lips together, trying to find the right words. "Before, no matter how late you came home, you always made time for me, even if it was just a few minutes. Now," she exhaled softly, "now, I feel like I'm just a stranger sharing a home with you." Adrian studied her for a moment before letting out a quiet chuckle, one that held none of the warmth she once knew. "Rose, you're overthinking things," he said, patting her shoulder before disappearing into the bedroom. Rose remained standing in the kitchen, a cold emptiness settling deep within her, despite the lingering warmth of the room. The distance between them grew. Adrian became consumed by work, by meetings she no longer heard about, by gatherings she was no longer invited to. Some days, he left before she even woke up and returned long after she had fallen asleep. Their small apartment, once filled with laughter, now echoed with silence. So Rose began to pray again, a habit she had long abandoned. "Lord, give me patience. Help me remember that I chose him for love, and love was never meant to be easy." But deep inside, she knew this wasn't just about work. Something or someone was pulling him further away from her. She just didn't know yet that the storm had only begun. The party was held at an opulent hotel in the heart of London, where crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light over glasses of golden champagne. It wasn't Adrian's first time attending such an event, but this time, he no longer felt like an outsider. He was no longer just the ambitious young man stepping into this world with nothing. He was now an emerging entrepreneur, a man with valuable connections. And that was the night he met Pinky Laurent. She appeared like a single pearl among a sea of diamonds. A silk red dress clung to her figure, her lips the color of deep wine, her piercing blue eyes holding secrets yet to be told. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, but she possessed a magnetic allure, the kind of woman who knew exactly what she wanted and exactly how to get it. "Adrian Brooks?" Her voice cut through the low hum of conversation as he stood by the bar, sipping his whiskey. Adrian turned, surprised to hear a stranger call his name. "And you are?" She smiled, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Pinky Laurent." He took her hand, soft, but with a grip that was calculated, deliberate. "Never heard that name before," Adrian said, raising an amused eyebrow. Pinky chuckled, taking a slow sip of her cocktail. "Then I suppose I've done a good job of keeping a little mystery." She didn't need to introduce herself. The whispers had already begun the moment she walked in. Daughter of a French financial dynasty, with ties to the most powerful players in tech and finance. She didn't run any company herself, but everyone knew that the men who passed through her life all rose to unimaginable heights, almost as if she had orchestrated their success. Pinky Laurent didn't look for love. She looked for men with potential, molded them into kings, and pulled their strings from the shadows. And tonight, her eyes were on Adrian Brooks. She knew how to make a man feel special. She didn't flatter him outright, but she let him see that she understood his ambitions. "You're at a crucial turning point in your career," she said as they stood on the balcony, the night breeze cool against their skin. "You have talent, Adrian, but talent alone won't take you to the top." Adrian frowned slightly. "And what exactly are you implying?" Pinky swirled the wine in her glass, her gaze sharp. "I'm saying that success isn't just about what you know. It's about who you know." He was silent. She wasn't wrong. He had seen it himself. The meetings, the contracts that weren't just won by merit, but by knowing the right people at the right time. Pinky tilted her head, her smile laced with intrigue. "I can help you, Adrian." He studied her, half skeptical, half curious. "Why would you?" A quiet laugh. "Because I invest in people with potential." She didn't say it outright, but Adrian understood what she meant. She wasn't just offering financial backing. She was offering access to a world he hadn't yet reached. A world that could turn his startup into an empire. But what would it cost him? He didn't ask. Maybe because, deep down, he already knew. In the days that followed, Adrian saw more of Pinky. At first, it was strictly business, meetings, introductions, connections she facilitated. But soon, the lines blurred. She appeared at the same events, seated him next to key investors, guided him toward conversations that could shape the future of his company. She never asked for anything in return. But Adrian knew nothing in this world came without a price. Rose noticed the change in her husband. Adrian came home later, often glued to his phone, sometimes leaving without explaining where he was going. She didn't want to be the kind of wife who questioned his every move, but her instincts told her something wasn't right. One evening, as Adrian stepped into their apartment after another business gathering, Rose spoke softly. "Where were you?" He loosened his tie, barely looking at her. "Just a meeting with some partners." She studied him, sadness flickering in her eyes. Sadness he didn't notice. Was Pinky Laurent there? Adrian hesitated, just for a second, before turning to face her. "Why are you asking?" Rose pressed her lips together. "Because I've been hearing that name a lot lately." He let out a short laugh, but there was something forced about it. "Rose, she's just a business contact. You don't have to worry." She held his gaze for a long moment before speaking, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm not worried about her. I'm worried that I'm losing you." He didn't answer right away. He only sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Rose, you know why I'm doing this." She nodded. "I do. But I also know that not everything that glitters is gold." Adrian's eyes flickered, uncertainty flashing across his face. But then he stepped forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Trust me, Rose." She closed her eyes, willing herself to ignore the storm that had already begun to stir inside her heart. "Lord, if this is the trial you have placed before me, please grant me the strength to endure it." But deep down, she knew the worst had yet to come. Rose couldn't remember the last time she and Adrian sat together without a phone on the table or a call interrupting their conversation. Their small apartment felt emptier with each passing day. Adrian came home when she was already asleep and left before she woke. Some days, the only way she knew he was still in London was through headlines, pictures of him among powerful businessmen, and sometimes beside Pinky Laurent. At first, Rose said nothing. She told herself it was just work, that Adrian was still the man who had once knelt before her in a quiet riverside garden, asking her to be his wife. But then came the whispers, the sympathetic glances from friends, the questions hidden behind hesitant smiles. One evening, as Adrian walked through the door, exhausted yet exuding a quiet self-satisfaction, Rose could no longer stay silent. "Adrian," her voice was soft, but not the gentle kind it used to be. He looked up, surprised to see her waiting. "It's late. Why aren't you asleep?" She folded her arms, eyes locked on him. "Can you be honest with me?" Adrian sighed, setting his briefcase down. "Rose, I really don't have time for this right now." She stood, stepping closer, her gaze never leaving his. "This? What exactly is this, Adrian? Work? Or Pinky Laurent?" He hesitated, just for a second, but that second was enough. Rose pressed her lips together before speaking again, her voice quieter now. I have always trusted you. I've never asked where you go, who you meet, because I know you're building your future. But Adrian, I can't pretend I don't see you changing." Adrian frowned. "I haven't changed?" Rose let out a soft laugh, but there was no joy in it. "You haven't? Then tell me, when was the last time you spent an evening with me? When was the last time you asked about my day? Or held my hand without a phone ringing between us?" He opened his mouth as if to answer, but no words came. Rose's expression softened, but her voice was steady. "Do you remember why we're here, Adrian? We gave up everything to be together. I never asked for wealth or power. I only wanted you." "Rose," she shook her head. "But now, I don't even feel like I'm a part of your life anymore." Adrian exhaled sharply, frustrated. "I don't have time to constantly reassure you that I love you, Rose. My company is growing. I can't stay stuck in this tiny apartment forever. I need to move forward." A sharp pain twisted in her chest. "So that's it then?" Her voice was quiet, almost numb. "This apartment, this life, none of it fits you anymore?" Adrian didn't respond right away. And in that silence, Rose realized the distance between them wasn't just measured in late nights and unanswered messages. It was the distance between two people who had once loved each other, but were now walking entirely different paths. In the days that followed, Adrian's presence at home became even rarer. Rose tried, she truly did, but love could not be carried by one person alone. Then, one evening, Adrian came home for the first time in days. He stepped into the living room, but didn't sit down. He didn't even take off his coat. He simply stood there, staring at her. She already knew. "Rose," he took a deep breath. "I think we should get a divorce." She wasn't surprised. There was no anger, no tears, only a cold emptiness, like standing in the rain too long until she could no longer feel the chill. "Why?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Adrian looked away. "I think we're in different worlds now." Rose let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "You've known that since the beginning, Adrian. We were always from different worlds." He didn't deny it. She studied him for a long moment before finally asking, "Is it because of her?" His brow furrowed. "Pinky? No, this has nothing to do with her." Rose nodded, but she didn't believe him. She took a step closer, pressing her palm lightly over his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her fingers. "Tell me, Adrian, if I agree to this, will you be happier?" For a fleeting second, uncertainty flashed in his eyes. But then he nodded. Rose closed her eyes, taking a slow, steady breath. Perhaps this was the answer God had been waiting for her to see. Perhaps love was not always enough to triumph over ambition. And perhaps, sometimes, the only way to hold on to one's dignity was to know when to let go. The next morning, Rose packed her things. She didn't take much, just a few clothes, a couple of books, and her wedding ring. As she stepped toward the door, Adrian stood there, watching her with an unreadable expression. She met his gaze, offering him a faint smile, one last act of grace. "I hope you find happiness," she said, her voice light, almost like a prayer. Then, she walked away without looking back. Adrian stood there for a long time, watching until she was gone. He didn't know then that it would be the last time he would ever see her like this. A woman who had once loved him, but chose to leave, so she could keep what was left of her heart intact. Rose had never imagined she would return to the Sinclair estate like this. A woman who had lost the love she once believed was forever. She didn't cry. The pain had passed. All that remained was emptiness. As the gates swung open, she stepped inside, her pace slow, deliberate, as if counting every step. The house was exactly the same, grand, opulent, untouched by time. And yet, it still wasn't home. It had never been. Lucas was already waiting for her in the drawing room, his expression calm, as if he had expected this all along. "So, you're back," he said, without mockery or judgment. Rose set her bag down on a chair, offering a faint smile. "I don't think I had anywhere else to go." Lucas nodded, then gestured toward their father's study. "He wants to see you?" She wasn't surprised. Stepping into the study, Rose found Harold Sinclair seated behind his familiar mahogany desk. He looked the same, Sharp eyes, composed demeanor. But tonight, there was something almost imperceptibly softer in the way he regarded her. "You understand now, don't you?" he said, his voice devoid of reprimand, carrying only quiet certainty. Rose held his gaze. "I do," she said simply. "But I don't think I would change anything, even if I could go back." Harold studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod, as if he had anticipated her answer. "What do you want now?" Rose drew in a steady breath, her voice unwavering. "I want to undo everything I did for Adrian." Lucas stepped closer, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "Are you sure? You were the one who opened those doors for him. You helped him build everything he has. And now, you want to be the one to take it all away." A ghost of a smile crossed Rose's lips. "I helped him because I believed he deserved it. But now I see, not everyone knows how to appreciate what they didn't earn on their own." Lucas raised an eyebrow, assessing her. "So, this isn't about revenge?" Rose shook her head. "No, I'm not angry anymore. I just want Adrian to understand that if he's truly great, he should be able to rebuild from nothing." Harold watched his daughter for a long moment before, for the first time, a faint smile touched his lips. "Good. A Sinclair doesn't waste time on those who aren't worthy." Lucas pulled out his phone, typing out a few quick messages. "I'll handle the rest," he said. "Within a week, every deal you facilitated will be pulled. Every investor you introduced will withdraw their funding." Rose nodded. She knew exactly what that meant. Adrian's company would lose the silent support he had never even realized was there. And this would be the moment he discovered that he was never truly standing on his own. She turned away, walking out of the study without looking back. She didn't need to witness Adrian's downfall, because she knew losing something you never even realized you had was the cruelest punishment of all. Adrian sat in his expansive office, eyes fixed on the computer screen. The glaring red figures on the financial reports sent a wave of unease through him, an unease he couldn't shake. His company was in trouble. 3 major investors had withdrawn in just 1 week. 2 critical contracts, ones he had once considered solidified, were abruptly canceled without explanation. His phone rang incessantly, but every call brought bad news. Adrian had never felt so out of control. He pushed back his chair, striding toward the window, staring down at the bustling city of London. This was the world he had dreamed of conquering, the world he had believed he was on the verge of ruling. But now it was slipping through his fingers, and he had no idea why. That evening, Adrian arranged a dinner with one of his longtime associates, Charles Whitmore, a powerful investor he had always respected. They met at an upscale restaurant, but the atmosphere was nothing like their previous meetings. Adrian set down his glass of wine, fixing his gaze on the older man. "Charles, I need to know what's going on." Whitmore exhaled, shaking his head. "Adrian, I think that's a question you should be asking yourself." Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" The man swirled his drink slowly before speaking. "Did you really believe your success came from just your talent?" Adrian stiffened. Charles continued, his tone calm but laced with meaning. "I invested in your company not just because I believed in your product, but because I trusted the person who introduced you to me." A cold knot formed in Adrian's stomach. "I thought you knew," Charles said, tilting his head slightly. "But I suppose you never stopped to wonder why so many doors opened so easily for you." Adrian's pulse pounded in his ears as suspicion turned into something far more terrifying. "Who?" His voice was hoarse. Charles studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You really don't know, do you?" He set his glass down, leaning forward slightly, his next words cutting through Adrian's pride like a blade. "Rose." Adrian stepped out of the restaurant, the cold London air hitting his face, but it did nothing to clear the fog in his mind. Rose. She had been there all along, not just as the devoted wife waiting for him to come home, not just as the woman who had quietly stood by his side. She had been the reason he had everything. She had paved the way for him, silently, discreetly, opening doors he had believed he had unlocked himself. She had believed in him so much that she had given up everything to help him rise, without ever asking for gratitude, without ever seeking credit. And he had betrayed her. Adrian felt his stomach twist violently. He had turned his back on the one person who had truly believed in him. He had tossed aside her love as if it were nothing, chasing after the glittering illusion of power and ambition. And now that she was gone, he was losing everything. The company's downfall spiraled faster than Adrian could control. Investors pulled out in waves. Employees, sensing the collapse, began resigning. The very people who had once praised him now turned away as if he had never existed. Adrian fought to salvage what he could, but every door he had once walked through so effortlessly was now slammed shut. There was no one left to help him. He no longer had Rose to shield him from the storm. And now, for the first time, he realized he had never truly stood on his own. Desperate, Adrian thought of the only person left who might still be on his side. Pinky Loran. She had brought him into the world of power, into the circles of the elite. If anyone could help him, it had to be her. He grabbed his phone, dialing her number. No answer. He called again. On the third ring, a slow, indifferent voice answered. Adrian, why are you calling me at this hour? Relief washed over him for a brief second. Pinky, I need to see you. She chuckled lightly, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, and why is that? Adrian clenched his jaw. You know what's happening. You have the connections I need. You can help me. A long silence. Then Pinky laughed again, soft and languid. Adrian, she said, her voice almost amused. Do you think I'm a charity? A chill ran down his spine. But you said. Yes, she interrupted smoothly. I said I could help you. And I did, when you were valuable. But now, she let out a small sigh. You have nothing left. Adrian's grip tightened around his phone. Pinky, I thought we were a team. A sharp laugh. A team? Oh, Adrian, how adorable you are. Her voice dripped with mockery. I've met men like you before. Men with promise. Men with ambition. But in the end, they're just pawns for those who hold real power. His chest tightened as reality set in. Pinky continued, her tone laced with boredom. So, do me a favor, don't waste my time. I don't entertain failures. Then, she hung up. Adrian stood there, phone still clutched in his hand, as the weight of her words crushed down on him. He had lost everything. No company, no reputation, no friends, no Rose. And now, not even Pinky Loran. He turned, looking around the empty apartment. The same place where, only months ago, he had believed he was standing at the pinnacle of success. Now he was alone, and for the first time in his life, Adrian Brooks truly understood what it meant to fail. Adrian couldn't remember the last time he had a peaceful night's sleep. Ever since his company collapsed, his life had spiraled downward with no way to stop it. He had tried to salvage what remained, tried to reconnect with former investors, tried to find just one more opportunity. But no one was willing to shake hands with Adrian Brooks anymore. His reputation was gone, his wealth drained away, mistake after mistake chipping at what little remained. But the most terrifying part wasn't the downfall itself. It was the absolute, suffocating loneliness. At the height of his success, his phone had never stopped ringing. Business partners, lavish parties, sycophants eager to be in his orbit. Now, in his failure, no one even remembered his name. No Rose. No so-called friends from the business world. Not even Pinky Loran, who had scoffed in his face before walking away on the arm of a man richer, more powerful, and far more successful than him. Adrian sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the glow of a single desk lamp casting harsh shadows over his hollowed features. His fingers clenched around a glass of whiskey, but the alcohol did nothing to numb the ache inside him. He had once held everything, and he had lost it all to his own arrogance and blind ambition. Adrian had nowhere left to go. One morning, as he stepped out of his apartment, he noticed a slip of paper taped to his door. A notice from his landlord his rent was overdue. If he didn't pay within a week, he would be evicted. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. A year ago, he had dreamed of buying a penthouse overlooking all of London. Now, he couldn't even afford to keep a modest rental. He wandered the streets aimlessly, walking through the city that had once felt like his kingdom. But London no longer felt like it belonged to him. The people who passed him by were caught up in their own lives, moving with purpose, unaware that the man they brushed past had once been a rising name in the business world. A year ago, he had believed he had pulled himself out of obscurity, that he had made it. Now he realized he had never truly stood on his own. Rose had been the one who lifted him. She had quietly, selflessly, laid the foundation for his success, creating opportunities he had foolishly believed he had earned by himself. She had believed in him, loved him, given up her world for him, and he had thrown her away, all for an illusion of greatness that had never truly belonged to him. He stopped in front of a small cafe, the same one where he and Rose had once spent quiet afternoons together, sharing dreams about the future. He remembered the warmth in her eyes as she listened to him talk about his ambitions, the way she smiled, the way she believed in him so completely. He had everything, and he had been too blind to see it. And now, standing there, staring through the glass window at the place where they had once been happy, he finally understood, but it was too late. Adrian had disappeared from high society. After the collapse of his company, his name vanished from lavish parties and financial headlines alike. He had once been a rising star, but like all stars that burned too bright too quickly, he had fallen without a safety net. Meanwhile, Rose moved forward, not as a woman standing behind a man, but as the rightful heir to the Sinclair legacy. And then, one evening, she returned to the public eye at the most prestigious event of the year. The annual Sinclair Gala was always one of the most extravagant gatherings in the American financial world. Only those with true influence, Wall Street moguls, elite investors, and powerful CEOs, were granted the privilege of attending. But this year, the center of attention wasn't a billion-dollar deal or a new rising star in the stock market. It was her. The grand doors of the ballroom swung open. Conversations halted. Every gaze turned toward the woman who had just stepped in, an entrance so commanding that for a brief moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Rose Sinclair stood there, draped in a sleek black silk gown that hugged her frame. Elegant, understated, yet exuding an undeniable strength. Her dark hair cascaded in soft waves, accentuating the sharp contours of her face. No extravagant jewelry, no ostentatious accessories. She didn't need them. The quiet power in her presence was enough to make her the most captivating figure in the room. She required no introduction. She was Rose Sinclair, the true heiress of the Sinclair empire, no longer a shadow behind anyone. "She's back," whispers rippled through the crowd. No one could believe that the woman who had once given up everything for a reckless love was now standing before them, stronger than ever. She looks even more radiant than before. Seems like what happened with Adrian Brooks didn't break her. No, it made her even more formidable. From across the room, Lucas Sinclair took a slow sip of his drink, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips as he observed the reaction around them. Rose had nothing to prove. By simply stepping into this room, she had already won. In a dimly lit corner, away from the attention of the guests, a man stood watching. Adrian Brooks. His name was not on the official guest list, yet somehow he had managed to slip inside. Perhaps through a reluctant invitation from an old acquaintance, or maybe because, once upon a time, his name had carried just enough weight to grant him access. But it didn't matter how he got here, because he no longer belonged. His suit, though still well-tailored, lacked the effortless perfection it once had. There was a weariness in his posture, a hollowness in his eyes. Gone was the overconfident man who had once believed he was destined for greatness. He had come for one reason, to see her. But as he watched Rose from a distance, watched her command the room with a grace that had nothing to do with wealth or status, he realized something. She was no longer the woman who had once waited for him to return. She had moved on, and he was just a spectator now, a man out of place, lost in a world he had once thought he could conquer. Adrian wasn't the only unexpected guest at the party. Amid the glittering crowd and lively conversations about the financial markets, a woman strode in, her arm linked with a powerful, older man. Pinky Loron. She was as radiant as ever, perhaps even more so. Her crimson gown hugged her curves perfectly. A diamond bracelet sparkled on her wrist, and her wine-red lips curved into a self-satisfied smile. But as her gaze swept across the room and landed on Rose Sinclair, that smile faltered for just a second. Pinky hadn't expected this. She thought Rose would never dare show her face in high society again. She had assumed the woman would be forever branded as the ex-wife of Adrian Brooks, a failure in love and life. But here she was, standing in the center of the grand ballroom, more luminous than ever. Rose wasn't a broken woman who had been cast aside. She was no longer the shadow behind any man, and that unsettled Pinky in a way she couldn't quite suppress. She tightened her grip on the arm of her companion, a wealthy businessman nearly 20 years her senior, but still a promising gold mine worth exploiting. With her trademark confidence, Pinky glided toward Rose, a sweet yet poisonous smile on her lips. "Well, I never expected to see you here, Rose." Pinky's voice carried just loud enough for those around them to take notice. Rose turned slowly, her expression calm, as though this confrontation was barely worth her attention. "Neither did I, Pinky." Pinky tilted her head, eyes roving over Rose from head to toe. "You look better than I expected." Rose's lips curved slightly. "Thank you. I could say the same about you." Pinky chuckled, but there was a sharp glint in her eyes. "I'm just surprised. After being dumped by your ex-husband, I thought you'd disappear forever." Her words, laced with venom, hung in the air. The crowd around them fell silent, eyes darting between the two women. Some were visibly uncomfortable, while others were intrigued, eager to see how Rose would respond. But to everyone's surprise, Rose didn't show a hint of anger. She looked at Pinky, her smile unchanged. "You're mistaken, Pinky," Rose said, her voice gentle but cutting. "I was never dumped. I was the one who chose to leave." For a brief moment, Pinky's confident facade cracked. Before she could come up with a retort, a deep voice interrupted from behind her. "That's right." Pinky turned sharply. Lucas Sinclair. He approached them, a glass of champagne in hand, his demeanor calm, but his eyes cold. "It seems some people in this room still don't know the true story," Lucas said, his voice clear amidst the tense silence of the crowd. Pinky's eyes narrowed, but before she could speak, another voice cut through, steady, authoritative. "Perhaps we should enlighten them." Harold Sinclair. The entire room fell into an eerie quiet as the most powerful man in American finance stepped forward. The guests who had once whispered behind Rose's back now stood aside, their faces tinged with awe and respect. Harold stopped beside his daughter, his gaze sweeping over Pinky as though she were nothing more than a minor annoyance. Then, he looked around the room, his voice resonating without needing to be raised. "My daughter is not a discarded woman. She's not someone to be pitted or left behind. She is the heir to the Sinclair family, a woman who has chosen her own path." He paused, his eyes cutting through the crowd, lingering on those who had dared to judge Rose. "And all of you have underestimated her." A heavy silence settled over the room. The rumors, the gossip, every story whispered about Rose being a failure, about her being abandoned by Adrian Brooks. All of it crumbled in that single moment. No one felt more humiliated than Pinky Loron. She opened her mouth, perhaps to offer some defense, but no words came out. Her arrogance, her sharp words meant to tear Rose down, now only highlighted her own pettiness. Meanwhile, Adrian stood at a distance, a silent observer amidst the spectacle. Once, he had been a prominent figure in this world, a rising star, a man of influence. Now, he could only watch as Rose stood, unbroken and triumphant. And in that painful realization, Adrian understood something bitterly clear. He had never truly known the woman he lost. And now, with the truth laid bare for all to see, when the world finally recognized that it wasn't Rose who had been left behind, but Adrian who had been left by Rose, it was a fate more devastating than any revenge. The Sinclair Gala had never witnessed a silence this heavy. As Harold Sinclair's words echoed through the grand ballroom, as the truth about Rose was laid bare before the most powerful figures in American finance, those who had once whispered behind her back suddenly realized how gravely they had misjudged her. And no one felt the weight of that humiliation more than Adrian Brooks and Pinky Loron. Adrian stood frozen. He had once thought himself the victor, the man who had walked away from his marriage to rise to greater heights. But now, standing among the elite of the financial world, he saw the truth. He had never been the one in control. He had once been proud of his deals, his investors, the success he had believed he had built with his own hands. But it had all been because of her. Without Rose, he was nothing. And without her, he had lost everything. The people who had once toasted to his success now regarded him with cold indifference. Not with the contempt reserved for a worthy opponent who had fallen, but with the detached disinterest reserved for someone who no longer mattered. And in this world, no one cared for those without value. Pinky Laurent fared no better. She had thought she was untouchable. She had believed herself victorious when she had pushed Rose aside, taken Adrian's hand, and then discarded him the moment he was no longer useful. But now, as Rose Sinclair reclaimed her rightful place, as the room recognized Pinky for what she truly was, a social climber, a woman who preyed on men until they had nothing left, her carefully constructed image shattered. The wealthy man beside her took a small step back. Pinky felt it. She turned, forcing a smile, but his gaze had already changed. Around them, murmurs spread. Amused smirks, quiet, mocking laughter. In this world, a fallen figure could earn sympathy. But a woman who had built her power on manipulation, only to be outplayed, was nothing more than a cautionary tale. Pinky Laurent had just become one. Rose said nothing. She didn't need to. She hadn't needed revenge. All she had to do was let the truth reveal itself. Let those who had deceived, betrayed, and used others face the weight of their own choices. She walked forward, stopping in front of Adrian Brooks, the man who had once been her husband, the man she had once loved, the man she had once been willing to give up everything for. Now, he was nothing more than a hollow shell, a man who had lost everything, his name, his career, and most of all, the one woman who had truly loved him. She held his gaze for a long moment before speaking, her voice quiet but unshakable. You had everything, Adrian, but you never knew how to cherish it. Just one sentence, and it destroyed him. Adrian inhaled deeply, as if trying to cling to whatever pride he had left. But the truth was undeniable. He had lost the very game he thought he had mastered. Lucas Sinclair looked between Adrian and Pinky, then turned to the event manager, his voice calm yet sharp. Escort them out. No one objected. 2 security personnel stepped forward. One reached for Adrian's arm, but he pulled away. He didn't resist, but there was no trace left of the man who had once walked into these circles with unshakable confidence. He turned, looking at Rose one last time, but she was no longer looking at him. She had closed this chapter of her life for good. Pinky was no different. She tried to hold her head high, but she felt the weight of the stares, the quiet scorn, the realization that she would never reclaim her place here. They were led out of the gala, in silence, and as the grand doors shut behind them, one truth became undeniable. Adrian Brooks and Pinky Laurent were officially exiled from high society. There would be no redemption, no return. And Rose, she still stood, beneath the golden chandeliers, radiant in a way that only a woman who had truly survived could be. Adrian had lost everything. After that fateful night at the Sinclair estate, his name was erased from the American financial world. No one spoke of Adrian Brooks as a rising entrepreneur anymore. He was no longer the young talent shaking up the markets. He had no company, no investors, no allies. And Pinky Laurent? She too had been cast out. The wealthy men who once indulged her no longer welcomed her presence. She had become a stain they all wanted to avoid. Invitations to lavish parties ceased. No one placed trust in her honeyed promises anymore. And Rose, she had moved on. Adrian Brooks had once been a star on the rise. Now, he was nothing more than a forgotten name. After the Sinclair Gala, Adrian tried to reach Rose. He called, texted, even sent emails. No response. He went to Sinclair Enterprises, hoping to see her in person. But the moment he approached the front gates, 2 security guards blocked his way. Sorry, Mr. Brooks. Miss Sinclair isn't accepting visitors. Adrian clenched his fists. I'm not a visitor. I just need 5 minutes with her. One of the guards shook his head, his voice devoid of sympathy. Miss Sinclair gave clear instructions. If you come, we are to ask you to leave. The words cut through Adrian's pride like a blade. Does she really hate me that much? He let out a bitter laugh, but there was no humor in it. The guard remained silent, simply doing his job. Adrian knew there was no point in arguing. He turned and walked away, an empty hollowness settling deep in his chest. He had lost her, this time forever. When reputation falls, wealth follows. The luxury penthouses, the expensive cars, the extravagant dinners. One by one, they all disappeared. With no company, no investors, and no support, Adrian found himself in a position he had never imagined. Just another nameless man, lost in a world he had once thought he could conquer. He rented a small apartment in a modest New York neighborhood. No designer suits, no private drivers, no high-stakes meetings. Now, every morning, he woke up with no reason to leave his bed. His phone no longer buzzed with offers, deals, or congratulations. Only silence, a silence more brutal than any insult. One afternoon, Adrian passed by a small cafe in Manhattan. It was familiar. He stopped, staring through the window, watching as a young couple laughed over steaming cups of coffee. A memory surfaced. Rose sitting across from him, eyes warm with love, listening to him talk about his dreams. She had once looked at him that way. Now, that gaze no longer belonged to him. And there was no pain worse than realizing that the only person who had ever loved him genuinely was the one he had thrown away. Pinky Laurent was not a woman who accepted defeat easily. When she abandoned Adrian after his downfall, she had been certain she would find another powerful man to secure her luxurious lifestyle. But she had miscalculated. High society had turned its back on her. The same people who had once admired her charm now whispered behind her back. The men who had once showered her with gifts and attention now regarded her with disdain. Invitations stopped coming. The doors to the elite circle she once thrived in slowly closed. Even the tabloids took notice. Pinky Laurent, from queen of the night to high society's outcast. She tried to find another benefactor, but no one trusted her anymore. The wealthy man who had escorted her to the Sinclair Gala, the one she had seen as her next step, had quietly cut ties with her the very next day. For the first time, Pinky realized she had nowhere left to turn. No money, no connections, no name worth remembering. Before long, she left New York. She vanished from the world of extravagant parties, from the society pages, from the whispers of the elite. No one spoke of her again. And for someone like Pinky Laurent, that was the cruelest punishment of all. Rose had never felt this free. She stood on the rooftop of the Sinclair building, gazing out over the dazzling lights of New York City. This city had witnessed every chapter of her life. The naive girl who once believed in love, the woman who had lost herself, and now, the woman who had risen, stronger than ever. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying the crisp bite of late autumn. She pulled her coat closer, fingers wrapped around the delicate stem of her wine glass, the crimson liquid glistening under the skyline. No past to hold her back. No toxic relationships to drain her. No expectations weighing her down. She had lost something, yes, but she had also found herself. Work at Sinclair Enterprises kept her busy, but it fulfilled her in ways she hadn't expected. She hadn't taken over her father's empire in the way people had predicted. Instead, she had carved her own path, focusing on building a venture fund that supported startups led by women. Because she knew what it felt like to step into a world that doubted you. She wanted to help women like her, women who only needed one chance to prove they belonged. Her career flourished. No one looked at her with pity anymore. No one whispered about her as Adrian Brooks' ex-wife. She had rewritten her own story, not as Adrian's former wife, not as Harold Sinclair's daughter, but as Rose Sinclair, a woman who needed no saving, no validation, no permission to be great. One evening, as she left the office, a message appeared on her phone. Adrian Brooks had left New York. She stood still for a moment, staring at the screen. Then, she simply smiled. She wasn't surprised. This was not one of those stories where the betrayer returns, begging for forgiveness, and the foolish woman takes him back. There would be no easy redemption. No fairy tale endings. Because Rose didn't need one. She had made peace with the past. She had moved forward, and she had never felt more free. Karma has its way of balancing everything. Those who betray for greed will always pay the price. But will Adrian ever get a second chance? And will Rose open her heart again? Leave your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for more gripping stories.